Hello, this is Dr. Jason Munsell. It is about 12:30.
Hey, fam.
July 21st, 2016. I'm going to take you through some of Chapter 10 in this little lecture. One thing that I noticed, well, a few of you have emailed me about working ahead. We do have this week and then 2 more weeks of class. And so I have actually put the 2 last threads up if you want to do those earlier. Now, if you're in a situation where you're leaving town, or in Devon's case, she's going to Australia, good day, bye. Go see a koala. If nobody else is threading ahead, and therefore you cannot respond to somebody else, you can do extra tweets. That would be fine with me. But we got tweets this week, blogs this week, threads this week, then 2 more threads, 2 more blogs, 2 more tweets, paper, and we're done. Getting ready for, well, some of you are graduating, and if you are graduating, I need to know. I can go find out. Your grades will be due a little bit earlier. But in any case, and if you're working on, hopefully you're working on your second paper, but I'm happy to look at rough drafts and everything like that. So Chapter 10, if Chapter 9 was all about source, Chapter 10 is all about sort of the reasoning process. And I say here, Chapter 10 is a tool because a lot of this stuff is on Toolman. So, in any case. And by the way, I do love Fantasy Island. And every time I talk about Toolman, I talk about Fantasy Island. Just because when I think of Little Tattoo from Fantasy Island, and if you've never seen the opening, on the next slide I have a little link to a little episode of Fantasy Island, or the first part of it. But he goes to this, bell tower thing, and a plane comes in bringing the guest stars, or the guests, to the fantasy island where they can live out their fantasies. And he always goes, the plane. And so when I think of Toolman, and I think of Tattoo, and I think of Fantasy Island and Mr. Rourke, I think of declaim. That's the link. That's it. But in any case, I used to watch Fantasy Island all the time. Came on right after Love Boat, back in the day. God, there was some good TV back in the day. TV nowadays. Okay, I'm not going to show it right here, but you can, well, hold on a second. It's just fun. And it goes to it. Can you see that?
Ever wanted to be a superhero?
Oh, no.
Abby here. How awesome would it be to just throw on a cape?
Advertising. Retro Rebirth. Look at it. Can you see it? This is opening theme, Season 1, 1978. Ricardo Montalban. Here comes the plane. You can't see that, but if you go to the PowerPoint, you can. Billy. So the plane comes in. Declaim. Okay, that's it. All right. Okay, some of the big points at the beginning that I think are essential to understand when we're trying to understand reasoning in the media age and persuasion and all that jazz. What is reasoning? I don't know. We base our beliefs and evidence on reasoning, it says on page. Oh, by the way, as always, look at the various learning objectives. Identify the characteristics of reasoning in the media age. Describe the components of Toolman's model. Apply them. Understand the concept of narratives and how to evaluate them. Identify tests of reasoning and use them to evaluate arguments. Reasoning, which makes a rational link between the evidence and the conclusion. That's what reasoning is. We have evidence. There is smoke. conclusion, there's a fire. So, in any case, I'll let you look at that. My allergies bother me today for some reason. So that's reasoning. It's just sort of, it's thinking, I got evidence, it's moving me to a certain point, conclusion, whatever. Now, the very first bit, do we even have reasoning in the new media age in 2016? Sure. But Jameson and others, way back in the 80s, argue that, particularly in political discourse, traditional reasoning has been replaced by staged dramatizations of images. Yeah, it's all visual images and not just idea of image. And there's two aspects of that. First, persuaders typically make assertions rather than present research to support their claims. So a lot of things, if you go and watch the convention, if you've been watching the convention this week or next week, there will be lots of assertions, very little evidence, very little research. You think sometimes there's research in commercials and stuff like that, but mostly they're just assertions without any evidence to back that stuff up. So basically, the persuaders rely on an audience to possess a great deal of information already. So like the Nike swoosh doesn't. There's no research there. There's no evidence to back up the idea that Nike shoes are better than other shoes. And then also, so there's not a lot of evidence. Persuaders, this is on the page of top of page 270, when persuaders do offer proof, they tend to use dramatic and visual examples. So not sort of laying out the research as we would do, like in a traditional speech, right? And then, here's a big thing. Persuaders also use synecdoche, and I didn't discuss that in Chapter 7 when I did my lecture, but it is discussed in Chapter 7, to represent their arguments and fail to provide audiences with complete argumentative proofs. Synecdoche is important, and synecdoche, that's a really, really important, and also metonymy is very, very important. I have extra links about synecdoche and metonymy on KC. But if you go to Chapter 7, and you go back to page 198, where they talk about verbal distillation. In fact, you'll see in Chapter 2, persuaders often encapsulate arguments in single words or short phrases. Sometimes because media only provides persuaders with short amounts of time and space to express their ideas. Yeah, okay. Postman would add that today's audience are incapable of appreciating statements such as tab. This abbreviated style of speaking is often called synecdoche, the representation of large amounts of information in a short and memorable part of the body of information. And then they go on to looking more specifically at synecdoche. Eloquence today is about issuing clear, concise, dramatic statements. Synoptic phrases are more likely to be aired. All this stuff. Synecdochic phrases also become the capsule in which audience store persuasive events. So slogans, for instance, big example of a synecdoche. And that is, make America great again. What does that mean? So America is not great. So, or change we can believe in. What change? What? Or I'm with her, or moving forward together, or whatever that stuff is. But so it reduces all sort of like if you were to give a Finn's hacking a synecdoche. Yeah, we got some synecdoche and autonomy stuck in his throat. It's as if folks running for president, folks don't go read their they should, you should, but the platform, they got all this type of stuff encapsulated in, boom, slogan. That's synecdoche, and that's how that works. Now, metonymy is a little bit different, and that's also very important. I mean, it sort of depends. A synecdoche is sort of metonymy. I'll let you read the stuff, because it is a form, sort of a figure of speech, but also it's a mode of thinking. There is a really good book that I use whenever I teach popular culture, called Rhetoric and Popular Culture by Barry Brummett at the University of Texas. And he talks about text of popular culture. And to me, there's not a whole lot of difference between media culture and popular culture. But basically, he talks about how texts these days, whether it's a political convention or even a speech, really, well, it depends on the situation, but commercial, whatever, website, blah, 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 are expositional. And the rhetoric of popular culture will be manifested more often in texts that are metonymy, whatever, and narrative. Metonymy is the name of classical trope or a way of thinking that means a reduction. And so in a way, Synecdoche is a reduction as well, a part represents the thing. So basically, it gets confusing. They're very close, very similar to one another. When you think about something and reducing it to a simpler, smaller, more manageable image that leaves out certain details of the larger whole, you're using metonymy, which is very similar to the way that our book is using Synecdoche. Metonymy is a reaction to the problem, blah, blah, blah. So the whole idea here is that, again, we are reducing larger ideas into a Synecdoche and or metonymy, which is this little slogan, this little whatever that represents all this stuff that, like research and evidence, that's just not there. So that stuff is very, very important to understand at the get-go. Now, Toolman. This is where... So to understand Toolman, and this is classic sort of argumentation type of stuff, and I've talked about this, or I do talk about this in several different classes, and if you are to take a persuasion, well, you're taking a persuasion class, but it's, you know, basic sort of things. I mean, a lot of this stuff is basic stuff that a lot of people learn in Com 100 if you took my class. But basically, I'm not going to discuss the entire model, but we tend to have claims. Here's the conclusion, my point, my premise, data or evidence, the warrant, which is the reasoning process that moves us from data to claims. Sometimes we have qualifiers because, well, sometimes in this case it wouldn't be the best thing to do. Possible rebuttal and backing. I'll let you look at the delightful figure 2.2. But generally speaking, claim, basic assertion, like Fantasy Island helped make viewers' lives better. Back in '78, man, things were bad. Actually, things were pretty good for me. I was a young. Life was awesome. What are you doing, Finn? Okay, so it's not my real claim, but that's just so you have an idea. Or America is bad, or it isn't great, or our economy sucks, or whatever. So you have whatever the assertion is, that's the claim. And then you have the evidence or data. Okay, here's all the support, and you know, here they talk about all this type of stuff that you have hopefully learned in other classes, the different types of things that can, you know, serve as data. They have premise as sort of data, but really it's evidence such as examples, stats, testimony, all this type of stuff you learn at Com 100 that I'll let you read about. So for instance, the APA illustrated that a group of depressed folks became happier because they watched Fantasy Island. It's like therapy. They did this control group and everything like that. There's folks who watch something else. It's like a happy drug. Okay. So we have evidence. And then we have this idea of warrant, which justifies, it's the reasoning process that helps us move from, okay, I got this evidence, then what allows me to move from that evidence to my conclusion. And in this case, one could argue, I mean, there's lots of different rules there. One could argue that people tend to trust the American Psychological Association, so if they did the research and the research was sound and the method was sound, then yeah, I buy the fact that I can move from this evidence to this conclusion. The way they talk about it is a little bit different. When they talk about warrants, they talk about the band Warrant. What do they sing? Warrant. This bugs me. You're going to find out.